Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today we are going to be talking about The Beginner's Guide, a video game about video games and the people who make them, kind of, and the people who play them also, kind of. Joining me, as always, to discuss all things video games, one Pete Busby. How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing good. This one gets pretty close to things I know about, so I'm excited to talk about it. I have a disturbing fun fact. I don't know if disturbing bothered me, so I'm going to share with y'all so you have to think about it now. So, pigeons produce milk. It's called
What?
pigeon milk. Yeah,
I think I knew this. Yeah.
yeah. Technically, it's called crop milk. Pigeons aren't the only ones who produce it. Flamingos and male emperor penguins also produce this, but it's like a yellowish cottage cheese sort of substance that secretes from the crop, which is like sort of a part on the neck of a pigeon that they use to feed their young when they're first born. So yeah,
That's
pigeon
so
milk.
whack. They don't just puke into their babies' mouths like civilized birds.
They do later on, like the first few days. I think baby pigeons can't handle that, so they get crop milk instead.
Haha.
You mean to
Interesting.
tell me there isn't a hipster somewhere in Portland saying we need to make this into a thing that people drink and eat?
I mean, how could you? My God.
Look,
would
I
do
don't
such a
know,
thing?
but raw milk is a thing that people are trying to impose upon people. So
That's true.
I'm having a hard time believing that there's not someone who just feeds a lot of pigeons and is like, people don't realize how tasty crop milk is from pigeons.
I bet
That's
it's
my new
hard to
business.
harvest.
Yeah, maybe if it was like a better bird. Like, I feel like pigeon's a tough sell, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, it is. But it's also, alternatively, it's an easy bird to have a lot of.
That's
Mhm.
true. That's true.
And I'm Jess O'Brien.
Yes. That other voice you hear is one Jess Voidburger O'Brien. How you doing, Jess?
Hello, I'm well. I'm thankful that you guys played this game at my enthusiastic request.
And this was a fun game to play. Short, sweet, and had a lot to say, which is always good for our format.
Oh yeah.
Anything, if people wanted to get in touch with you or see your content, where could they do so?
Yeah, I'm Voidburger on pretty much everything. Your Blue Skies, your Twitch, junk like that. YouTube, Voidburger and Voidburger Gaming. If you want to see all my Twitch VODs, if you can't watch my streams, because I'm in a weird time zone now because I live in Europe now. So there you go.
The VODs are still there, and they still count, and the subscribe button on the VODs still works. So
Oh yeah,
go ahead
ding the bell or whatever.
Well, before we get to discussing the Beginner's Guide, a reminder you can get in touch with the show, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address. And you can also go to deeplistens.libsyn.com. That is our website where we host all of the shows, and we have comment sections there that you could use to tell us things if you so chose. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, which would get you access to our Discord, where you could talk with the hosts of the show. At the $3 tier, it gets you access to the OG Soncast, which is our anime podcast that, Pete, you're on. What is the show? What show are people getting
Boogie
next?
Pop Phantom is our next one. A short, fairly strange show, like many of the ones we watch.
Excellent. So if you want your late 90s, early 2000s anime told to you by someone who's probably your age or slightly older, go ahead, $3 tier. That's pretty great. And then we are rapidly approaching our 40 subscriber mark, which would make us have to play Duke Nukem Forever. So
Yeah.
that's bad. And you can make that happen to us if you so chose. And that's that. Going on to the Discord. All right. And then M, you're here. Hello?
Hello.
Discord report? Question mark?
Discord report.
Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. This week on the Discord report, uh, we're doing a fantasy, is it basketball league? Except ZP seems to be hosting it with, what is this? I'm
It's
not
not
involved.
basketball, it's video games.
What?
We drafted video games.
Okay,
Like,
I had no
how?
idea what was going on.
How, you ask? Well,
Yeah, what's the scoring system?
the scoring
Yeah.
system is ratings over, I believe, 70 points over 70% of aggregate review score. So if your game gets over a 70, it's I forget if it's 70 or 80. It's one of the two. For every point you get over that benchmark, you get a point. So the way it's set up is we've got a bunch of slots for any game. We have a few slots for new franchises, so you have to pick games that are new, not just a sequel. And then you have a counter pick, so you can pick games that other people pick. You have to pick games that other people picked that you think are going to be bad or won't come out.
Okay.
If it doesn't come out,
This
you
is
get 0 points.
upcoming
Yes.
games? Okay.
Upcoming games that are not out yet. Want to hear my team?
Sure.
I got Pokemon Legends ZA. I got Mafia: The Old Country, which I picked specifically because I thought it would bait ZP into saying something racist about Italians, and it did.
I mean, I was
Ah,
already preparing
easy.
to. I assumed that was the point.
The first Berserker Kazan, which I thought that was a new game franchise, and it turns out it's a sequel to a Korean MMO. So I might take it on the chin on that one. Death Howl, which is a card game. Cairn, which is a new game by the Fury people, Pete, if you remember them.
Yeah, I do.
It is a climbing game, though.
Oh.
Yeah,
Alright.
about climbing. And then my counter pick was Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered, because I don't think that's coming out. But yeah, someone had the audacity. Just El Dandy, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you will rue the day when you took Final Fantasy IX Remake and Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered. How dare you?
How many remakes is that for Final Fantasy IX?
The second.
Yeah, it hasn't been remastered yet.
It was remastered. It came out on mobile, and that was kind of a remaster. But this was supposed to be like an actual remake to a certain extent. Like, not quite Final Fantasy VII Remake level, but like more than just a remaster.
And there were fan versions.
And for the layperson, just, I know obviously, but for anyone who doesn't, what's the difference between a remake and a remaster?
So a remaster would be, it's the same game, but maybe we clean up some of the assets. So like the script is the same, the gameplay is the same, but maybe like this background that used to not be HD, now it's HD. Or like, hey, this character model that we used to only be able to do like, 50 polygons, now it's 200 polygons, and it looks way better.
Oh.
But otherwise, it's the same game. Maybe they put in like the ability to fast forward or something, or make the game run better. But a remake would be like Silent Hill 2, right? Different mechanics, different mechanics, different graphics. Maybe even the gameplay systems are completely different. Music might be different, the whole thing.
Okay.
But yeah, El Dandy, you will rue the day that you took Final Fantasy IX Remake, Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, Hollow Knight Silk Song, and Fable.
Oh, Hollow Knight. I mean, do we think Silk Song's coming out?
No.
It's not.
They have four games that might not come out. Like Fable might also not come out. I would say three of these games won't come out.
If one of them comes out, I think if it's like gambling rules, you're going to win a lot.
It's very high risk, but I just simply wouldn't have gone all high risk.
Yeah. I mean, Silk Song could like be an easy hundo.
Yeah.
But it's got to come out.
Yeah, and it won't.
If I had known that's what we were doing, I would have participated, but there was no explanation of this.
Sorry, you had to read.
It's a lot to read in the Discord every every
every
week.
day, constantly. And you could join it.
And you, too, could be participating in a video game league? Question mark?
Yeah, there's 12 teams, and the system said, "You sure you want to do that, buddy?" We were like, "Yeah." So some of these teams are a bit sketch.
Hmm.
You're really going bottom of the barrel on some of these franchises and games. Some of them will not
Fascinating.
get enough reviews. But yeah, that's the Discord report.
That's it?
And then for shout-outs, I mean, my obsession of the week. What should I go with? I mean, have you seen the new show Sakamoto Days, Pete?
I've seen ads for it. I haven't committed to it yet, but I'm probably going to jump in at some point.
Okay, it's pretty good. The premise is there's an assassin. He's the best assassin in the world. But then he falls in love and has a family, and his wife doesn't want him assassinating people anymore. So he gets chubby. He starts running a local convenience store, and then wouldn't you know it, the life pulls him back in, Keanu Reeves style. It's pretty good. It's fun. It's wholesome. As far as, a show about assassins, it can be. Yeah, on Netflix. On Netflix now. Check it out if you so choose. All right, the beginner's guide. Jess, since you encouraged us to play this game, how would you summarize this game?
I would say it is a character piece and less like a video game. I wouldn't call this. I think this leans more toward art than game, if you were to be really reductive about it. But it is about games, and it is mostly just about relationships and how we read into stuff in a lot of different ways. I don't want to spoil everything. I don't know.
Yeah, we will go through spoiling it little by little, for sure.
Yeah.
But so every level in this game is kind of made in the Source engine, similar. So the developer of this game, Davey, last name
Reading.
Davey Reedon, is the developer of the Stanley Parable, and similar to the Stanley Parable, this game is made in the Source engine. But in some ways, this game is a lot it goes in a lot more places. I mean, the Stanley Parable goes in a lot of places too. I'm just trying to how to reduce it down. Like, it's a bunch of micro games with Davey in character or out of character narrating over them.
Yeah, there's like a weird meta. You're not sure what's real for a little while because there's a measure of verisimilitude that Davey Reedon, the developer, is evoking here in order to get you to buy into the premise that is the beginner's guide, which is that Davey had a friend called Coda who, Dave was a huge fan of his little experimental games. And at some point, he just kind of disappeared and stopped making games. And so he just kind of wants to show off his friends' games because they're so great.
Yes. And so all of these games are little micro games that you are generally moving around with WASD, and then occasionally you can click on things. But there are very few games with any mechanic beyond clicking things, at least early on. So Pete, when you came into this game, you came in blind, right?
Yes.
How at face value did you take Davey's initial narrations? Like, did you think anything was up early on in this game?
No, I mean, initially I assumed they were accurate. Honestly, you know what it reminded me of? This is probably a touchstone mostly for me. When Franz Kafka died, he asked his friends to burn all of his materials. He's like, I don't want any of this published. Get rid of it. But his friends were like, no, Kafka's such a genius. We need to publish this so the world has it. So because I came in with that in the back of my mind, my first thought was basically like, oh no, I'm pretty sure this Coda guy's dead. And that's the only reason Davey can release this stuff. So that was my first thought.
Mm.
Jess, what was your first thought playing this, coming into it? I know you've played it a while back,
Oh,
so I don't
man.
know if you can recall that
Yeah,
initial impression.
I think I bought into the premise initially, And I think a lot of it is because, like, Davy comes out and introduces himself as Davy Reedon. I made the Stanley Parable. If you have any questions you want to send me, it's davyreedon@gmail.com. Like, that's his real email address. So I kind of just bought into the kayfabe of this game, that it's being presented as real and being presented kind of in this almost documentarian sort of style, or kind of like a tour guide taking you through a museum or something like that. So I did buy into the premise because it was presented to me with this verisimilitude angle to it.
Yeah, and me coming in as well. At first, I was taking it fairly at face value, especially because the very first level you see is like a source engine map for Counter Strike. And it's largely a Counter Strike map with a few like weird bits and bobs, like some floating crates, some stuff that's like solid colors, primary colors that jump out in what is otherwise like a vaguely desert or Middle Eastern looking map.
It's like D-Dust, isn't it? Like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's D-Dust with crates in weird spots, basically. And Davey's saying, like, yeah, what I really enjoy about this map is that, there's these elements of unreality to it, and I think it really speaks to Coda's style, that, there's these elements that make you question, the space you're in, but this is really simple. It's a really simple thing, but it caught my attention early, which had the feel of, like, I met this person, and I think I've discovered an auteur, right? Like I've discovered this auteur. Other people might not understand, might think this is D-Dust that someone messed around with just a little bit, but I see that there's secret genius here.
Yeah, there's something more to this, and you can really get to know somebody through their art, is like a very big like assumption Davy makes throughout this game.
Yeah. And as we get further in, I feel like the artist is dead is something that we're gonna probably, as a
Oh,
as
most
a like
definitely.
literary theory, have to talk about. Pete, can you just give people a primer on that concept, because we're gonna probably throw it around a bit.
Yeah, sure. So this basically, this is Roland Barth, if I remember correctly, and he was basically saying like, look, you can't really look at a text and learn too much about the author, right? One, that's not a very like interesting way to analyze books. Like I don't really care that much about Hemingway. He doesn't seem like he was a very interesting guy. But also, like there are so many competing influences that go into any text, like things the author wasn't aware of, things they maybe tried to do but failed to do. Like that authorial intent doesn't really say anything. What you really should be looking at is what showed up on the page, and what went into that doesn't really matter at this point.
Mm.
Sure. And Davey kind of at the even in the very first level, he says, like, this is my friend Coda. I hope that, showing these games off will inspire Coda. Seeing people play these games will kind of inspire Coda to make more games. And I think that playing these games will give you insight into Coda. So, like, if the author is dead, posits, like, hey, authorial intent doesn't matter. Knowing a bunch of background about the author, like, is not a very interesting way to interpret works. Read what's on the page and what it says. This game is reading what's on the page or the game on the disc, and all that Davey seems to be interested in is what it says about the author.
Yeah, he
Like,
thinks that everything in all of Coda's games is psychologically important and is imbued with so much meaning. And like he's pretty unaware of like the fact that he's bringing so much of his own baggage into his
Yeah.
interpretations.
yeah, and he's also not really interested with what Coda could be saying about stuff other than Coda, right?
Yeah.
Like, if these games could be talking about some other feelings or some other wider things, maybe he's not interested in it. He's mostly just interested in, is this a self-reflection of the author?
Yeah.
What does it reflect about the author?
There's like an interesting extra layer too about like what text Davy is analyzing.
Yeah.
So like he's
Yeah.
made a bunch of decisions to like one, look at all of the games as an integrated whole, whereas that's an
Mhm.
arbitrary decision. He didn't have to do that. We're not even sure if he can do that. And then two, to bring in all that other information he already has about Coda, like things he's just met and either assumed or, gleaned somehow. So there's a lot of other sort of weird Deridian analysis moves he's doing where like everything is the text. There is nothing that's not text.
Something that's funny, and I noticed on my playthrough this time, is that sometimes when Davey, so when he introduces the games, sometimes he'll be like, "This next one is like a little not great, a little rough around the edges," or like when he negs the games occasionally. It's because those are the ones that actually like kind of have a point and seem to be trying to say something to Davy, and he just kind of like he doesn't want that. He wants to interpret it. He doesn't want the game to actually have a conversation with the player.
Or a clear message. Like
Yeah.
even the very second game, right? So like the first game is a source map with some mods. The second level is a shooter with no enemies, with a gun that doesn't reload. And Davey, as you're like walking through it, says like, yeah, this looks unfinished. You know, like the gun can't even reload. It implies that there are enemies, but there aren't. And then we're in the second game here. Like you get up to a maze. It doesn't take that long. Also you can see off the bottom of the world, which I think is a really nice touch from like, this person made a game really fast.
Davey teleports you past the maze because he's like, you don't want to do this. Like,
That was exactly what I was going to get at. Is
Yeah.
like you get to this maze, and Davey's like, I guess this ship has a labyrinth on it, but I don't understand why. So let me just teleport you past it. So like, even from the second map, Davey is making decisions about what parts of this game and its experience are worthwhile.
yeah, authoritarian decisions, I guess. Whatever the correct word for that is.
Yes. Pete, what did you think?
Authorial.
There you go.
What did you
Alright.
think about the decision making that Davey starts, applying to these creative works about what is important and what isn't?
It reminds again. I'm going to be referencing a lot of like obscure literary nonsense probably today.
This game invites it. I think this game
Yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of it's a bear trap for English majors.
So there's, I've already mentioned him sort of in passing once. There's a very famous theorist, I think his first name's Jacques. He's French, so let's assume.
When in
it is.
doubt, it's a Jacques.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm.
Jacques Derrida, and he has a very famous essay where he analyzes a typo in a text. Like he basically analyzes the text as if the typo is important and was meant to be there and should have been there. Because again, he's just like, look, texts are texts. You can make anything you want to text. Go for it. And I feel like Davey is sort of making a similar kind of move where he's like, look, the text is whatever I say the text is. So if this is it now, this is it. I can analyze whatever I want, which goes contrary to his entire mission of trying to like reveal interesting insights into Coda. But if you then make the next leap, if you make the next leap and say, well, Coda themselves is a text, so we can write whatever we want into them, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
it's very interesting that it takes almost no time for Davey to make authorial decisions. And it also raises questions about the games that you're even seeing, right?
Mhm.
Because Davey says, yeah, there's this maze, but I'm just going to skip you through it, which means Davey had edit privileges on the game in some way, right? Like it implies that Davey can skip you through the game. And it's pretty early on, like almost every game from game 2, Davey is going to modify in some way. And
Mhm.
at least early on, Davey is acknowledging it in the narration as like, look, there's this cool thing about the game, but asking you to play the game the way the author intended, it's clunky. I deem it clunky. And
Mhm.
clearly the clunkiness isn't part of the experience. The part I want to show you is, so let me just modify the game for you.
Yeah, he thinks he's curating instead of like changing key elements, I think.
Can I ask just like a general question here? Like, what's the mechanism Davey's using to make these changes? Like, would the idea be like Coda provided him with some sort of source code?
I think that since he does know how to code in source, I think that like I'm totally guessing, by the way. I think that since this is just a game that, he sent him via email and stuff like that, you could just like unpack the code and mess in the code if you wanted to, but I'm not a game developer, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, so my guess would be when I've messed around with prototypes and stuff, you can compile things to an executable file then it will just play the game. That's all it can do. But there's also the source like project files that a lot of engines will have just like the project files that you could pass around. It would probably be passing around like a folder with all the code and then executing it that way. Because if they just passed like an exe file, it would take a lot of effort to deconstruct that and then modify it. But also, we don't know, right? Like, Evie says, Coda used to share these games with me. And almost all of my communication was that Coda would just send me a new prototype, right? So we really don't know how he's getting any of this. We also don't know if Coda exists.
And like the thing is that like, by the time you get to the end of the game, there's kind of like a fourth wall breaking sort of meltdown that happens. And it's kind of like, why would somebody release this on Steam if they had an on mic meltdown? Like the fiction kind of leaks through in such a way that you need to like suspend disbelief for certain things. And I think maybe like, how is he able to, manipulate these games could be in that category as well.
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I was just like mostly concerned. I know literally nothing about game development. So it's like, what's the actual technical way they would do it?
There are ways, depending on how you shared the game. If you shared the source files, someone could then go in and modify them and then make an executable from the modified code. Yeah, so the second game is kind of interesting. Like you're in the shooter, he teleports you past the maze, and then you are told to walk into this beam to stop what is called the Whisper Machine. When you step into it, you die. And then Davey says, so that's what was supposed to happen. And that's what happened, I guess, in the version he had originally. But the first time Coda did this, actually there was a bug, and this is what happened instead. So you replay the end of the game, the end of this micro game, and instead of dying and staring at the door you walked in sideways, you instead are slowly teleported through the ceiling and just slowly drift upwards. And you can see the map, right? You can see all of the clipping beneath your feet. You see the maze from above. Which version of the ending? One, which version of the ending did you think worked better? And two, which version of the ending do you think was supposed to be the ending?
I mean, the floating one is way more interesting, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think the bug version is more compelling,
I agree. I like seeing the whole world and like the artifice cut away.
And it kind of like feels like, more of a noble sacrifice than just like, you're dead.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it feels dramatic, like you're, ascending and all that stuff. Like here goes the hero. Like
yeah, and that's kind of how Davey interprets it. Is like this bug like informs Coda from here on out. Like this bug changed the way Coda designed games, which like this is like the second game Davey's ever seen. So the idea that this one bug was the like the moment because it was something that Davey could play. You need to use to interpret all subsequent works is kind of like, Pete, do you think, would you read like an early work from an author and be like, yes, this one turn of phrase will now inform all of Hemingway's works from here on out?
I mean, no. That seems like a weird way to read things. Also, like, how would you know? Like, there's no way unless you go to the archives and see like Hemingway wrote down like, I thought of white elephants and I knew elephants forever. It's just a weird move.
Yeah, like if you're not coming in from a source of having historical context for this person's work.
Yeah, and we are building that context as we go, but
it's a lot of extrapolation.
And we have this narrator who's telling us this is in fact the case, right? Like Davey has no debate about whether this is informing the rest of Coda's work, and he's the person who's telling us stuff. So at least at first, I did not question this. Then we get a level that I think is pretty darn cool. It's the one where you're on, it's a stark white environment, and then there's just a set of stairs, and then a blue sky. So it's a very abstract space. As you start climbing the stairs, at first it moves normally, but then the game slows you to a crawl and opens a door at the top of the stairs. And Davey says, yeah, you can hit enter and move at normal speed if you want. Because there's something at the top of the stairs, and you don't want to move slow. So there's no way you could get there.
Let me skip you to the good part.
Yeah.
Not realizing that he's skipping the good part, perhaps. Like,
Yeah. So I kind of want to ask, like, there's two interpretations here. Like, there's the interpretation that Davey has, which is that the slowdown part is a barrier that is meant to be overcome. And then there's the game as designed, which you are allowed to play. You don't have to hit enter.
mhm.
Did either of you play it, quote unquote, as intended?
No, I mean,
I think the first time I played this game, I tried it for like a minute or two, and I was like, "Oh no, the rate of speed we're going here, it's gonna take like over an hour to climb these stairs." And I was like, "Okay, no."
Okay, because the first time I played through, I replayed this a little bit. The first time I played through, I hit enter, and it gets you to the top of the stairs, and you see what's in the room. Um, the second time I tried it, just like as quote unquote intended, it only takes like 2-3 minutes.
Really,
It's not that long to get
it
up the
feels like an
stairs.
eternity because like it's such a like stark, boring environment, and like nothing is happening. That's
It
really
is.
funny.
And what Davey, like when you get to the top, there's this room and text just starts flying up around you. And the text seems like game ideas, right? Like abstract game ideas. And a lot of them are good too.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like there was a game idea that was like a game where sharks are trying to eat you and you're trying to eat them. Heck yeah. Or like a game where you are a queen who's polishing jewelry as her kingdom falls apart. A game where you were a gate was another one. Like, weird little games, weird little ideas that sounded like cool ideas for micro games, which seems to be what this guy makes. And what Davey says is, Coda was someone who was difficult to get to know, but knew that he was a good person and was full of cool ideas. So once you overcame that barrier, you got to know him and you got to see that he was actually brilliant.
Access to someone's inner world.
Yes, that is his interpretation. Is climbing up these stairs is the barrier to get to know Coda, and then the room is Coda's inner divinity, inner mind. Like some inner space. Alternative interpretation that I think I at least came to playing the game slowly. Could it just be a rumination on the creative process?
Yeah.
Like
sure.
you're
Could
climbing
be.
up these stairs, it's easy at first, then it's hard going, then you get to the top and you can express some idea, right? Like,
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could also very easily run like a Marxist analysis and be like, this is about the market of game creation, where like you try to make a cool thing, you have all these great ideas, but there's this endless staircase of capitalism to get your way through. Like you could run any number of games on it.
Mhm.
yeah, you could put any number of lenses on it, but the lens that Davey surfaces is this is about the author. All of it's about the author and about the author's mental state.
And I think that like in so doing the skip, like you can skip the stairs. I think that skips like the meat of the conceptual point of it. Because a lot of
100%.
this a lot of like these micro games and like this in general feels like conceptual art, like modern art, where a lot of, as the Simpsons once called it, POMO, weird for the sake of being weird. And it's like you could be dismissive and be like that. And you could be like Davey and just be like, let's skip the boring part. Let's skip the hard part. But it's like, what if the hard part is the point of it? You know?
Oh, I actually missed. There was a level backwards where you can only move backwards, and you
Oh
just
yeah,
see
yeah.
text. Like that level's really cool too. And Davey's like, yeah, this game's a little bit, it's interesting. You can only move backwards, but it's really short, and it's short, sweet, gets to the point. It's a little clunky, and it's a game that's like, hey, if you can only move backwards, how can you see forwards, right? Like, or how can you see your future if you're always looking back? And that's elegant, right? It's an elegant little message. It's easy to interpret, but
And
because there's
and
no
Davey
secret,
dismisses it because
yes,
it's not it's not weird enough. Like it's actually telling you what it's talking about. And Davey's like, meh. Like,
It's real mid.
like it's like the way he interacts with games is the game for him is to figure out like totally weird theories on like they're not that weird, but I mean like that's where he gets his entertainment out of this is not taking it at face value. So if something is presented too plainly, he thinks lesser of it and he's like, that's not one of the good ones.
Yeah, and I think from a mechanical perspective, this is one of the cooler ones, right? Like a game where you can
Yeah.
only move backwards is. I mean, we just saw this actually when we played
Oh yeah, mouthwashing.
mouthwashing. It does the same thing.
Yeah.
It uses the
Yeah.
same mechanic at one point. So it's interesting. Backwards, it's really fast. Davey doesn't have a lot of narration, and Davey doesn't mess with it. Also, it's another one of the games that you play through, and there's no modification that we can
Yeah,
detect.
it's one of the rare ones that he doesn't fuck with in some manner.
Yes. Then you have entering, which is just like walking on a path, and it says you are now entering, and that's it. And Davey's like, you'll get this when you get to a later game, right? It seems like it's not important, but you'll see. It's all important. Then there's there's the puzzle room. So this is the level's called puzzle, and as you are going in, it starts with like a title, and David's like, yeah, a lot of Coda's works had a weird title, whatever. And then you kind of walk in, and then there's the puzzle. Guess what is the puzzle, quote unquote?
So the puzzle, and it's a reoccurring puzzle, and Davey warns you that it's a reoccurring puzzle, so watch out for that. Like, haha. Stay tuned. Like he's really stoked about it. It's a very, very simple puzzle where there is a door, and you open the door, and there's like just this like weird dark space and another door, and so you're just like, okay, there's like nothing here. There's no way to open the door in front of you, and it's like, what do I do now? So you might close the door. The way you solve this puzzle is the lever that opens the first door. It takes a little while for that door to animate from a closed position to an open position. So what you do is you sneak out, hit the lever again, so the first door closes, and the lever for the next door to open is on the back side of that door when it's closed. And that's the puzzle. It's very simple.
Yeah, it's very simple, but Davey keeps saying, note this puzzle down. It's going to show up a lot.
He puts a lot of meaning into this puzzle.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I guess we can go back to it later when we get further into some of the meta elements of this game. But this puzzle and its prevalence, it makes me really wonder how many times this puzzle actually got put in these games on purpose by
Yeah.
Coda.
Good question.
By Davey, yeah.
Yeah, but we'll see. But the puzzle at the end of this level, you get further in, and Davey says, "Okay, cool. It's like an end of a room. You got through this puzzle, whatever. Hit enter, and I'll remove all the walls from this final room." And Pete, what happens when you remove all the walls?
Is this the one with all the like crisscrossing staircases, like some MC Escher stuff going on all over the place?
Yeah, you're surrounded by rooms and spaces that you could not get to and could not see.
And he's like, "Wow, there's this whole inner world that you don't get to see, just like
like,
just like Coda."
hmm.
Hmm.
There's a metaphor here, isn't there?
But also, you need to remove the walls and have access to the source code in order to see this stuff.
You weren't
So-
supposed to see this.
Yeah, you weren't supposed to see this, and if Coda wanted you to, you could have, right? So
It reminds me of like a lot of other games that like people when they do like cam hacks and stuff like that, they will find something weird outside of the map. And they'll assign meaning to this weird thing outside of the map. And then, like, when you talk to the developers, they were just like, oh, there's a cheeseburger out there because when we deleted the cheeseburger, it broke all the physics in the level. So we just had to hide the cheeseburger somewhere.
Yeah, or
And, like, people are, like, so intrigued by this shit.
there's the example too of like I think in Fallout, one of the like tram
Yes.
tram trolleys is just a dude with a big tram head because that was the
Yeah.
easiest way to make it.
yeah, making a character. They had character walking down, but making a tram walk or move was hard. So they just made a character walk around below the level.
Oh, that's so fucking funny. I love that one. But like the thing is that like those are, very necessary workarounds for those games. There is like a question of like why would Coda make all that shit outside the level that you can't see? I am like real question. I don't know why he would do that. That seems like effort.
Yeah, I mean, from a development perspective, and it could just be Coda was expressing ideas, and maybe those were meant to connect at some point into the level, and Coda abandoned it because it's abandoned, right? Like this is one thing that Davey says is like Coda would make games and then put them down and not really revisit them. It's possible that Coda had a bunch of ideas, and then this was the executable, and maybe they were supposed to link up, and Coda never got around to connecting them. Maybe Coda just like I've definitely when I've messed around with game development, sometimes I've just moved to another part of the map because an earlier part of the map I wasn't feeling good about how that worked, and I never bothered to go back and delete it. Like I focused, this is the part that I'm going to work on now because I've got plenty of space on this canvas, and then laziness, I just didn't delete the stuff that I didn't feel good about.
Valid, valid.
Yeah, I just imagine too. Coda's like, oh, I'm not that good at making stairs. Let's practice stairs for a while, and then just never bother to get rid of them.
Totally. There's a bunch of explanations here of someone working through a creative process that Davey imposes one meaning on, right? Like this is secretly a game about a hidden life, that there's this entire world inside of Coda's head.
Yeah, he really doesn't like phrase it like perhaps or one could interpret this as. It's very factual. It's like you can tell from this that Coda was thinking this.
And again, this is a game that without Davey messing with it, you literally would not know the thing that Davey thinks is interesting exists. You cannot see through these walls without Davey modifying things. So it's an experience completely counter to what if Coda had given you this executable, what you would have gotten out of it, which is interesting and will continue.
Can I ask too? I wasn't sure when to bring this up. I'm going to do it now because I want to ask. So, like, I can very easily see, like, a casual person, like, somebody who just likes playing games, coming to a game and, like, doing this process, being like, oh, I know about the person who made this game because X is in this game. That makes sense to me from, like, a layperson's perspective. But if you were, like, a serious games journalist, like, if you were somebody who, like, analyzes games, for their job or at the very least, like, takes it very seriously, would you do this? Like, is this something people actually do when they're trying to do serious analysis?
I mean, like trying to modify the game or trying to interpret the.
Trying to be like, would you, if you were a serious game analyst, would you come to a game and say like, oh, I'm just going to use this to learn things about the creator?
I think that probably depends on the person.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on the person. My personal perspective, like when I've analyzed games professionally, no, I'm trying to analyze the text and what it says about the wider world, not very navel gazy. Like, tell me about the author and the auteur.
Yeah.
Though it's worth saying, like some games are more personal than others, right? Like,
Sure.
I'm thinking like Fez, is a game that like at first blush is one thing, at another blush is another, and if you know the developer of that game, like they speak a lot about their games, right? Like Phil Fish says a lot about how Fez was made. Like there are some auteurs who are way more explicit about this is a thing kind of about me or something I'm going through, and it adds some text to it.
And I feel like a lot of those developers talk about that because it gets misinterpreted and that bothers them. You know, they go on the record to correct people's interpretations of these things instead of like encourage interpretations of these things, which I think like the real Davey Reedon, it's hard because I don't want to be weird parasocially about Davey Reedon, but his games really like speak to me on this sort of weird parasocial level that his games implicitly are warning against doing. So it's just like a recursive parasocial problem here. But it's like there's a lot of things in this game that are very introspective about like the character himself ends up having a very introspective, harsh read on himself through going through all of these games in front of a microphone and everything like that. And it becomes, you playing the game are using this game to psychoanalyze Davey by the end of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So like it's just like this incredible recursive little trick it's doing that I'm just like blown away by.
Yeah, I think the game's saying a lot of very interesting things. I'm just trying to think of like if Davey were like a serious, like if you did this in the literary analysis circles, like you'd have to work in a very specific area to be taken seriously. Like anyone else would be like, this isn't what analysis is for. You're doing the wrong project. But like the game's doing much more interesting things. I'm just saying if Davey were a real person doing this, he wouldn't be taken seriously.
Well, I think part of the situation is that he presents himself as an authority to begin with, because he's like, I did the Stanley Parable. and it's just like, oh, okay, he's a person that is of authority. He made this game that we know and we like, and I think like that in of itself is like an authority pull, and in addition to being like a verisimilitude sort of thing. So it's like, you should take me seriously. I would know about this. I'm a game developer.
And the I'm a game developer part of this, I think, does a lot of the work too. Is like, if you went into someone's art gallery and they're just a random person who is trying to sell art, and then they try to explain to you the meaning of a bunch of pieces that are in their gallery, you might not give them a lot of credit. But if someone's like, I am a serious artist, and here's this curation of art that I enjoy, and let me tell you what it means.
And you respect that artist, for example.
Exactly. Exactly. And you respect them, you might take it at a higher level of artistry than if it was just random stuff put together, in someone's house or something.
Mhm.
And I think it does a lot of work. But yeah, to be honest, Pete, I don't know that I've seen any game developers who have tried to do this sort of deep introspective work of someone's entire catalog of games they've made.
Right. Yeah, because it's weird. Why would you?
Oh, it's super weird. Yeah.
I've seen definitely like some people who have written like, hey, you can see that this sort of thing happened in this person's life around that time, and look, it starts showing up in their art, But the code is a black box to us, right? Like, for example, I know like my favorite game, Final Fantasy IX, right? Hironobu Sakaguchi, the lead developer of that game, lost his, I believe, mother in a house fire around the time that game came out. That game cares a lot about life and death, right? You can do some autobiographical additives to say, okay, there's a theme here that was probably coming out of the author experiencing and thinking about this element a lot while they were making this game. Cool, fine. What do we know nothing about other than Davey met him at a game jam once, right?
Mhm.
So we're trying to reverse engineer this person's mental state entirely through their work. It's not like we're adding some seasoning to an otherwise complete work. We have these really, some of these games are very didactic and say one thing and get in, get out. Some of them are really wide open to interpretation. And we're trying to impose a bunch of mental state onto this person as though that's the only thing they could have been thinking about was their own internal. And we'll get to it. I think this next game is kind of like, there's exiting, which is you're walking on a path and it says you are now exiting. And Davey's like, look, there was a game that said beginning and this one says exiting. These games are supposed to be interpreted as one long work. And it's like,
Oh.
it made two little things and thought it was cute. Who's to
Yeah.
say? But we get to down. It says the great and lovely descent when you start this game. And you are at a house or a restaurant that says, what is the name of the restaurant? It's like the Streetwise Fool, I think is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like it's a house or a cafe, and it's called the Streetwise Fool. And then as you get closer, some doors open, and one of them goes down into an abstract space below the house. And you keep going down. It's an impossible geometry sort of situation. There's some spots where like you go into gates and you get blocked, and Davey's like, yeah, and in this area you had to wait for like an hour for these gates to open, but I'm just gonna, let me just move you along because that's dumb.
And then he talks about how Coda got like mad at him because Davey called his games unplayable, which is, hey, rude. you know, hey, dude, yeah, that's rude. And so Davey was like already critiquing Coda to his face, obviously, and saying like, you should change this. This would be better if this was like that, and already trying to have authorial intent on this guy's games. And then he told a story about like, Coda got pissed off at him for this and then made a game that was called like playablegame.exe or something like that. And I forget what the game what it actually was. Do you remember?
I know it was like a whole bunch of recurring, and like he played all of them to see if there was some sort of trick.
I think it was just rooms you could move around in. Like, I don't think there was anything in it. It was something very glib like that.
Yeah, something like catty and glib like that. And Davey went and like tried to deep dive on these things that had nothing to deep dive on.
And like, as you go down in this house, when you get to the bottom and you skip through the parts where you were supposed to stop and be in a space for a bit, you get to a room with 3 people with green boxes for heads.
Like cube heads, yeah.
And they ask you a bunch of questions. Also, that puzzle, the like door puzzle, is there. in this game again. And it says, like, where'd you come from? What's the world above? And there's a dialogue system now. You can pick between one of three answers. And one is like, there was a world stamped with whiteness. There's this enormous prison I spent hours in. There are these floating colored blocks. And then he's like, yeah, and then there's this important thing. Did you get through this puzzle with 2 doors and switches? And it's like, yes, it's the last thing I did before getting here. No, I don't remember it. I prefer not to tell you. Like, they say, please tell us how you solved the puzzle. Tell us the solution. Tell us more about this puzzle. And I found it kind of interesting that, like, the first question was, hey, remember all that cool stuff you did? We're not going to focus on that. Actually, what we're going to focus on is this little puzzle that, like, barely matters. That's all we're going to ask you about from now on, is this little puzzle. And it kind of felt to me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, kind of felt like Coda talking to Davey, or talking to someone who was very much obsessed with a little thing in the game, right?
Yeah.
It's like an experience of, hey, you created this work, but the only thing I care about is this one piece. Please tell me about this one piece that I've hyperfixated on. And it makes you kind of do it. Like, you see all this cool stuff, and then you end up in this space that's very normal looking. It almost looks like a room in, like, I don't know, like a community hall or something. And they're like, hey, answer all these questions about this one inane puzzle. Tell me all about this one inane puzzle.
And then they like re-ask you the questions because you leave, and then that room happens again, right?
And they keep asking you, like, how do you solve this puzzle? What's the point of this puzzle? And so I didn't know at first if it was like Coda saying, like, hey, this puzzle is actually really important. That was what I was getting at. Or if it was like, you know, hey, there's this dude who keeps asking me about this puzzle. All we know is that Davey's getting these games, right? We don't know if Coda ever intended a wider audience to see them. Actually, we are pretty sure he didn't, or they didn't. So how much are these games speaking directly to Davey? They are made for Davey to teach Davey something or tell Davey something, because Davey won't listen to anything but games that he can analyze.
Yeah. There's also like the Occam's razor, like, this doesn't mean anything answer of just like Coda didn't know what kind of questions he wanted these guys to ask. He was just testing like the system, like the dialogue tree system. It was just like, I don't know, what would they ask about? Maybe about the puzzle. Okay, whatever. Like,
Totally.
we have no
That's
way to
also
know.
fair. Also a totally fair interpretation. Like, hey, let me test this dialogue system. And
Yeah.
what do they ask about? I don't know, the thing that I just made.
Like almost everything in this game has very big potential to have a very mundane answer behind it, and Davey will never even consider such a thing. It's so funny.
Yeah. Pete, did you have anything to say about this level?
I mean, nothing I don't think that we've already covered, or haven't covered. I will say I just like the people's cube heads. I think they look
Yeah.
cool, and I think that was a good choice on Coda's part.
Yep. It is evocative, for sure.
Yeah.
Then we get a level that starts with, this game is connected to the internet. And it looks almost like a Dark Souls, or like any of those games that have like a note system that you can just like drop a note on the ground. And if you walk up to these notes, text comes up. But the game is not connected to the internet. It's just meant to evoke a space like those games. Did y'all read all of the dialogue bubbles?
I mean, most of them. I don't know if I went out of my way to hit them all. Maybe there were a few I missed.
Yeah, I kind of picked and chose which ones. This is maybe my favorite micro game, actually.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, what did you think, Jess, of the micro game? Like, what jumped out to you as interesting?
I also I super like it because of the stuff Davey says during it, which is, maybe your first real hint into what's happening here, really. Because he admits that, like, okay, this is like the first game that I played of Coda's, because he brought it to this game jam where I met him. And it, like, really, I was going through a tough time in my life, and it really spoke to me. And I was like, oh, here's where this is the juice. I see where, okay, something going on here. And he even admits that he kind of came on a little strong to Coda to be friends with him, but he was very patient with me, and I cooled down a little bit later. And I thought, like, wow, that was a really almost introspective moment there, Davey. Close call. But yeah, like, all these little notes, which are not from other people, they're from Coda. A lot of them are sad little thoughts, like little negs on yourself. And upon, replaying it, you think to yourself, which one of these are perhaps added by Davey to make the game seem more interesting?
Yeah.
What if that?
What if Davey messed with it? What if Coda is just writing in a bunch of voices, different voices, like to say, okay, how do I make this feel like a lived-in space with multiple players? Okay, I'll write in different tones across these messages. Some of them feel very on point, like you get to the puzzle again with the doors, and there's a bunch of notes that are like, this is impossible. Look, if you play a Souls game and you get to a puzzle, there are going to be a bunch of notes that are like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Which I thought were really cool. Yeah, this is another space where you start the layers start getting peeled back on maybe Davey. Actually, yeah, I guess the games after this one, maybe if we're going to interpret as Coda speaking to Davey in some way, it's probably the games after this one. So maybe the door one previously, and that's also again taking Coda at Davey at face value on when these things
Right.
happened.
Mm.
As I recall, too, is this the one where he sort of starts telling us about Coda's descent into loneliness and despair? Where he's like, I really think this is indicative of Coda's desire for more human connection, and he really just wants to
Yeah.
get out there. Yeah, so this isn't even where he's like going to, okay, here's how this reflects things I at least think I know about Coda. This is where we're taking a further step into, okay, here's how this tells me about things Coda should know about themselves that I know.
And then treating Coda like a project.
Yeah.
Like, if only I can get people to see how cool this is, then that'll fix Coda and it'll fix me because I'll feel great about fixing somebody. And this is, importantly, the one that he admits he was kind of intense towards Coda and he was going through a rough time
You
and stuff
don't
like
say.
that. And it's like, oh, the projection starts getting more and more intense starting here, I think.
Yeah, and to that point, Pete and Jess like he says, "Hey, there's all these messages, but the internet isn't connected." So like Coda's, it's
Ooh.
about being like talking to people, but no one's talking to Coda. It's all Coda. You're surrounded by Coda's thoughts. Isn't that sad? It's
Mhm.
like, wait, but maybe it's an artist trying to evoke something in someone else. Maybe it's not just them acting out their depression on this
Yeah.
game space.
And it's like, "Oh, Davy, you're depressed. You're lonely. You're the sad person here putting all this meaning on this that's super tragic." And it's like, this is important to you because you need to see yourself reflected in it so badly.
Yeah. Yeah, the interpretation that actually this artist created a space that I guess the presumption is that Coda's just replaying this game over and over again to feel like they have companionship. Like it just doesn't even hold up, right?
Mm.
That
Mm.
well as a interpretation. But
And it's clearly it's a game jam. Like
yeah,
he doesn't have the skill set to connect this to the internet. It's a little experiment. Like, what if this? And
yeah,
calling it "this game is connected to the internet" may not be this cheeky meta narrative thing. It might just be like, oh, pretend that this was connected to the internet. Wouldn't this be neat?
For our listeners, I mean, I imagine this is a game podcast. They know what a game jam is. But how about a two-line description for them?
sure.
I would call a game jam kind of an informal gathering, semi-serious conference sometimes, but mostly it's just a bunch of amateur or beginner/intermediate indie developers getting together and under some sort of time limit usually designing some little micro game of some sort.
Yeah, and
And it's
usually there's a
it's like a
theme.
mixer. Usually
Usually
there's
there's
a
a
theme
theme.
and it's to encourage relationships, to people to meet each other and work together and stuff like that.
Yeah, sometimes there's a theme and you make a team, like you get there and then you create a team and then make a game again under like a time constraint. Like one of the famous ones is Train Jam. Like a bunch of people get onto a train and by the time they arrive at where the train is going, you have made a game, right? Like your time limit is as long as you're on the train. And sometimes they'll come up with a cool theme and it's really abstract. And then sometimes there's ranking at the end. Like, you play a bunch of demos and awards are given out. Sometimes it's just for the experience of making stuff. It varies from jam to jam. Yeah, like imagining a game jam and coming away with it, playing a person's game in a game jam and coming away with it going, maybe this person's really depressed.
And
Yeah,
I need to fix them.
I need to fix them.
Yeah, is wild. And the games after this, you get Porn Stars Die 2, which is
What a good name. Oh my god. I
Yeah,
love the
interesting
name of this.
title.
What a wacky ass name.
it's a great name. And you are in like a bungalow sort of feel, looking out on kind of like a beach expanse or like a cliff with a well, and then there's bars over the exit of this house, I guess,
It's
that you're
like you're in a
supposed to
little
be in.
diorama or something
Yeah.
with like bars on the front.
And as you explore the space, you eventually find like there's a secret exit, and then you go into like this underground space that seems like maybe you end up at the bottom of this well that you could see at the beginning. And Jess, what is Davy's interpretation of this space and the games that come after it?
Oh boy. Just, isolation, solitude. He's like, "Oh, this well, like it's so important and you can it's awful to see someone unraveling through their work," is something he says. Which, foreshadowing. But it's like it's so serious. It's like, oh my god, this guy is like terminally depressed, like fucked up depressed to make such a thing and to revisit this theme over and over again because he had different versions of this game where there's like a prison sort of area you're in and a well sort of area that you kind of, I guess, aspire to go to or something, including ones where you start at the bottom of the well and like there's nothing to do there. He just kind of flashes you through a whole bunch of different scenarios of it. And by the way, that like bottom of the well thing comes back in the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, which is really funny to me.
Oh,
The big hole. But yeah, Davy's interpretation of this is like, oh my god, we're seeing someone unravel through their work.
yeah. It's just Davy's interpretation is like Coda is making prisons, just trapped in prisons. You are constantly trapped in prisons. When you were playing through each of these, did you have that interpretation on your own, or did you just buy it when Davy said it?
Oh, like, are these a series of prisons that he's confronting?
Yeah, did you feel like these are a series of prisons?
No. It's just like houses. Like, you can't get everywhere in every game all the time. Also, like, Porn Stars Die 2 could potentially be a depressing game. It could also be a very funny title, like,
Yeah.
depending on which way they go with it.
Yeah. Like the very first one, I was like, oh, this feels almost like Myst, or something. Like you're in a space, it's kind of abstract, and then there's secretly like this hidden compartment that you can explore. It felt like a puzzle house or like an escape room or something, which are not inherently depressing experiences. You get to another version of it where like you get to this room full of furniture, and then the room like expands out forever. And he's like, yeah, you're trapped in a prison with all these pieces of furniture. It's like,
And he was also like kind of like dismissive of that particular version, even though I thought that one was pretty interesting, that the room
yeah.
expands out and there's more and more strange abstract furniture situation going on. So it's like a maze a little bit. And he like immediately dismisses this one as like, this one's kind of weird. Like, ugh, like
Yeah, it's oh
Gross.
man, it sure is weird how this becomes, a kind of a labyrinth, and labyrinth kind of look like folds, and then if you pull back, folds kind of look like a brain. No, no, this is just a weird one. This one's dumb.
yeah.
There's versions where you start outside of the barred room and you're looking into this barred room. And I forget whether Pete, you or Jess said, this could just be a person riffing, that they
Yeah,
made some
right.
assets and they're just reusing them over and over again to make different games.
And like Davy interprets that as like a struggle instead of perhaps like a playful thing that Coda's doing, like just fucking around. But to Davy, these are all cries for help, which is
Yes.
super sad. And then there's like, I think this is also where one of them ends with like the phone booth,
The lamppost.
the lamppost with like there's like a telephone booth there
Yes.
though too, and you have
Yes.
the little dialogue system, and you're talking to yourself from the past, and they're like, "How did
Mhm.
you escape this room?" And it's very similar to the previous dialogue tree, where it's just kind of like a conversation that doesn't super go places, but there is some like kind of like affirmations at the end where it's just like, be sincere, be true to yourself, or something like that. And it's like, that's not the world's most depressing thing. I don't know, like
Mhm.
whatever, dude.
Yeah, it's not super depressing. It just kind of makes you think in an artiste sort of way, you know? And also, I think the lamppost, Davey's like, this lamppost is going to show up in a lot of games coming forward. Like,
Yeah,
this is,
and it's gonna really pull it all together.
yeah. And then we get the house where you walk up to a house, and I believe as you're walking up to the house, Davey's like, this space is kind of like the two-door puzzle, you know? Like, there's this other area over to the left, and then,
This transitory space that you can't
yeah.
stay in forever.
Yeah, and the transitory space is where you're doing puzzles to clean this house,
Yeah, little
and
tasks.
little tasks, and then at the end you get to go to the lamppost that's up the hill.
And the big tell here is, Davey says at the start, like, oh, it's this transitory place that you can't stay in for too long. And then he admits that, this used to go forever. And he made it so that it stopped and you had to leave. And it's like, but Davey, you just said, what the hell, man?
Yeah, that the house actually originally was just doing chores and talking to this bot. Like there's a dialogue system. There's someone saying like, I really enjoy cleaning. Like making a space clean. There's something meditative about it.
I think that Coda's writing is better in this one too. Like he
Yeah.
was actually trying to have a nice conversation instead of an information exchange conversation, like a character conversation. Davey's not interested in that at all. He doesn't even point out that Coda's writing is a little bit improved here, narratively styled. I don't know.
Yeah. Pete, did you have any thoughts about the house and the cleaning?
I actually like the house. I think this was my favorite of all the mini games.
This is a close one for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was also way better before Davey screwed it up. When you could just sit there and just do chores all the time. I'm surprised he didn't make some sort of weird domesticity claim, honestly. That he was like, this is Coda yearning for family life and to settle down and just go the whole way if you're gonna apply weird psychoanalytic, definitions to the work.
Yeah, for sure. And then we get lecture, which
Oh, I love this one too. Shit, is this my favorite? Hang on.
this level, it starts by saying items you love at members only prices, and it starts with you in a lecture hall, looking at a professor who is just saying to be perfect, one must be perfect. Everything in your life must be done simply, and it's just a lecturer basically telling you how to be a perfect person. And then it cuts to you as the lecturer, and you have to pick dialogue choices of this person espousing how good their life is.
And clearly they're making it up on the fly. They're
Yes.
not saying anything of import.
100%. And Jess, what is behind the person who's listening in the crowd?
Man, at the back of the room, there's only one person, quote unquote, in this room. At the way back of this lecture hall is not a wall, but a giant, it looks like a flaming nebulous eyeball, like an iris. And it is scary and ominous as hell. And it's got this super scary noise going on with it too. That's rumbling and there's some screaming going on and you're just ignoring it. So fucking cool looking. This is probably my favorite imagery, at least, in this game.
Most definitely.
It's so big and it's like a jump scare almost. It's really cool. And Davey interprets this as I believe he interpreted it as, you can't put people on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah, Davey. And you want to apply this to anything? And you're so close. You're so close. What if it was about that? Yeah. Anything else to add? No. Okay. He was so close to having a little revelation, but he pushes it away at the last minute, and it's next game.
Yeah. And the next game here, and this is also one where in between the games we get more narration about, hey, this next game that we're gonna play, it's in a theater, but it's a pretty simple game, and for some reason it took months. Coda was really starting to slow down in producing games. Must have been going through something. With no assumption of hey, maybe Coda didn't want to talk to you anymore or give you games anymore. Maybe putting some distance between you was an intent here. No, it's probably because Coda was struggling. That's why these games are taking longer.
Maybe dude just got busy in his real life. maybe he was making games and not sharing them with you because you're weird. Like,
Yep. So the theater, this one's quite cool, I think.
This is a good one.
Yeah.
So you're on a stage, and it tells you to like take your place next to this wall. And then when the wall pops up, then a person pops up out of the floor, and you need to ask them questions. And every time you ask them a question, like the director says, no, 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 you asked it wrong. That's not how it happened. This person is like someone you look up to. You need to ask them the right question, the perfect way, and then eventually bumpers show up to
To,
like bounce you
represent the
around.
crowd. Yeah.
Yeah. It bounces you around and you ask the questions. And then by the end, it says, no, 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 maybe it's not about asking the perfect question. Maybe you just need to go and like think about other stuff. And then it locks you away from going back on the stage. It sends
Yeah,
you
you
deeper.
start backing away from the front of the stage to the back of it. And there's just like it's a huge space too. I really love the use of space in this game. Like claustrophobic and like agoraphobic, and it's all over the place. I love that shit. And yeah, these gigantic grates like fall down from behind you as you're walking away. And like as that's happening, Davey is telling you his interpretation, which was like, oh my God, he's isolating himself.
Yeah, and this is the narration when you're getting from the game, like the game narration, not the Davy narration. Like you're messing it up again. You'll freak her out if conversations get this personal that quickly. Do you not realize how important this was for me? I'll never get an opportunity like this again. Everything was riding on this. I want to try something. Try stepping back from the stage. This is working. This is what it was like. That's perfect. Wonderful. This is really wonderful. You're doing great. So like back away, like create more space from this person who you're really anxious about talking to. Like maybe put some distance.
Or like stop being so performative. You were on a stage.
Yep. Also a good interpretation. And Davey again can only see this as Coda being depressed. Like no other potential interpretation. Like even
Everything's a cry for help. Everything.
the fact that it's on a stage. Like, hey, it's a performative space that I have evoked in this world. No notes about that.
Yeah. Like when there is obvious symbolism that it's like, oh, that's like a slam dunk. That's an easy one to get. Like Davey completely ignores the more obvious potential symbolic solution to something.
Is this level set up on a stage about performance? No, it's about depression.
I'm curious too. Not that like this is a good way to approach literary analysis either, but I'm curious like what Davey was doing in those moments he wasn't looking at Coda's games. Like, did he ever think to just like go like, "Hey Coda, how you doing, man? Like everything good?" And Coda's like, "Yeah, man, like okay, cool, cool,
Yeah,
cool." Like, just ask.
I wonder, like, how good of a friend was this guy ever? Because it seems like a very transactional relationship. Like,
Yeah.
it's just using Coda for games.
Yeah, and like weirdly clandestine, where he's like, "Oh, Coda's communicating with me through these secret messages,"
Yeah.
as opposed to
like,
just talking to his friend supposedly.
yeah. What a freak.
Yeah, 100%. The next level is one where it says you're supposed to keep your eyes closed. It's the Mobius trip. You're on a spaceship that's hurtling towards, I think it's a door?
Really big door.
A big door that's coming at you.
The spooky door.
And everything, there's like alarms going off, like awooga, red alert. We're gonna crash into this big door.
And the door is the door from the puzzles. The like 2-door puzzle that you have to do all the time. Davey says like, yeah, this is clearly like a game that you can't beat if your eyes are closed, but it tells you that you should have your eyes closed. And it's dialogue based and no one's talking, so it would be impossible to solve with your eyes closed.
You can't read it, yeah.
The interpretation here is again like Davey says, like I said, I was getting concerned. First off, he's never been explicit in his work about what exactly he's thinking. Not true. So where's that coming from? But then even weirder, his work has potentially stopped being an outlet for him. Not like he's having trouble iterating on ideas, but literally he can't think of new ideas anymore. And in person, he was being a lot more distant than usual. You know how sometimes a person will just deflect anything you say just to keep themselves disconnected all the time? Here's that kind of thing. Here was the point in my relationship with Coda where I really started to wonder if he needed my help in some way. And his games are going to get more desperate from here on out. After this game, it's 6 months before he finishes something new.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh.
6 whole months between making
God.
games?
For me?
Yeah. His
For
best
me.
friend?
I really like that, like, this is just a cool one in general, but like it's also kind of a puzzle a little bit because you have to like do something in order to prevent the ship from crashing into the door and then restarting the level because you have to like get it right. And you go up to like a little bridge area where there's an NPC next to the lamppost, the iconic lamppost that means so much. And this NPC you have to have a conversation with, and it's something along the lines like you have to speak the truth to stop this. And it's like the truth was like, I'm burnt out. I don't want to do this anymore and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, you have to admit that like you don't want to keep making these micro games, which also is like fine. Like even if Coda was saying explicitly like I'm kind of burnt out on making games through art, that's a rumination on the artistic process, right? Like
Mhm.
that's a completely valid, and I've seen plenty of look, if the Oscars couldn't give the Oscar for Best Picture to a movie about people ruminating on the artistic process every year, I don't know what they would do. Artists love ruminating on the artistic process, and like Davey can't even allow that space, right? I feel like it's one of the most navel-gazy things that artists do, and also impactful, right? Like that's there have been entire schools of art that are based on treating the artistic process more deliberately or more expressively. But yeah, he can't allow that. It's got to be that these are cries for help. It's got to be autobiographical.
Yeah, it's very one-to-one.
Yeah, you can't make art about being burned out without being burned out. Like what? I don't know that that's true.
And it's like, if he is, so what? Okay.
Yeah, you just be burnt out for a while. It's fine.
That's okay. You can burn out for a while and take a little break. He's totally allowed to take a break, but it's like Davey's like, oh, it took him 6 months. That's terrible. Like, it's okay. You can have a break. Like, that's what Wander Stop is about, which is coming out next month if you're listening to this in February of 2025. Or at least I think that's what it's about. I only played the demo that they gave to press. Like, a lot of Davey's games seem to have this back burner through line of the process in general and how game development wears you down and other people's expectations and other people's interpretations of what's going on and being misinterpreted. Those are like super common through lines in his games.
What did you think of the island level? So this is one where it's the next one. You're walking through a white space and you have to give dialogue answers, and every time you give a dialogue answer, like more walkable space becomes revealed.
I found it very foggy. There's a lot of fog.
Very dreamy. Sure.
I remember when I played this level for the first time that it made me cry. Because I was like buying into Davey's interpretation of this one.
Mhm.
And it was also because like I was going through burnout at the time. So like this one being even more explicit about feeling burnt out, like really hurt me, like good. Like
Yeah.
it was like cathartic to see like these words written large. Like I can't do this, is not fun anymore. I can't do this anymore. And like about how you feel like you can't stop doing
Yeah.
this stuff. Those themes become, I think, actually kind of true at this point of the game. Like Davey isn't actually all the way wrong about some of these games, but he's not actually taking the lesson to heart, which is leave me alone. You're causing me stress.
Yeah. And also like we get the lamppost again. We get almost the space from the Porn Stars Die 2 level, except it's very similar furniture. You get a woman just kind of like behind the bars at the end. And I think that this is definitely another game that you could see it as a rumination on the creative process and on burnout. Davey takes it one step further and says, this is a cry for help that I must fix. So
Yeah.
even if it was just the exact interpretation Davey had, Davey takes it as a call to action to keep bugging Coda, right? Not like, hey, Coda, want to go hang out and do something that isn't making games. Just like, is this around the time where Davey says he starts showing Coda's games to people?
It's close to it, if not like this exact moment.
I think it's after the one with the machine.
Machine. Okay, that is the next game in the sequence.
which is also almost like my favorite too. I don't know. Now I'm like, oh, these are all my favorite.
It's like picking my child. Like I love them all equally.
They're all good.
Yeah, this is the one. This is the one where Davey, looking at the narration now, I started thinking Coda's stuck in his own head and that he's having a negative effect on him, and so I just started showing his work to people to get actual feedback in his games, and I might get him out of his isolation.
And they liked it. Wow. And it was so good to hear that. And it's like, oh, good for you. This is like a Munchausen's by proxy affirmation validation loop here. What are you doing?
Yeah. And in the machine, the level is a bunch of people basically telling the player, hey, the machine isn't making games anymore. Sort it out, basically. And there's this
Go fix it.
machine. Go fix it. And you can then talk to the machine. The machine doesn't talk back. And you can either say, I'm going to destroy you, or I'm going to destroy all the things you made.
Or like you're letting everyone down by not making things.
Letting everyone down by not making things. And the level ends with you first shooting all the previous games Coda has made with a gun.
You also have to
And it-
talk to the press. There's like
Yes.
the press out there, and like you tell them like we have to destroy it or something like that.
Machine isn't giving us the games anymore, and I will fix it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, shooting, like mechanically, shooting all of the old games was the coolest thing I think Coda
Yeah.
ever made. Like,
Yeah. This is like a big breakup game, and like Davey didn't like read it right. That's how I interpret this, is that like the protagonist, quote unquote, in this game, the person you're controlling, I think, is Davey, and the machine is Coda. And it's like, you're not treating me like a person. You're treating me like a machine for your entertainment. And when it doesn't produce things, you lash out at me and blame me for it. And this isn't about you. And if you actually cared about the machine, you wouldn't be treating it this way. You are destroying the actual intent and meaning of my works by being this way. And you're not going to fix me or fix anything, examining these things to death. You're actually making it worse to do so. And Davey interprets this as like, oh my God, like he's destroying his own works. And it's like, no, you are destroying his works, you ass.
Yeah. And like some of the narration that Davey has in this, like I felt there was a friend who was in trouble, who was unhappy, and maybe they didn't like themselves, and I could fix it. If I give him this gift, maybe I could fix the problem. When other people told me how much they enjoyed his games, it was the best feeling, the absolute best feeling. It made me feel so happy, so beautifully, beautifully happy. Anyway, so Coda finishes this game, and then it just kind of takes off for a while. So like, again, all of this stuff is about Davey feeling like an auteur for acknowledging Coda's work, right? Like, I'm a genius for having found this person. I look at these cool games my friend made, and let me tell you what they're about, and how gratifying that experience is. And then the game in front of you that you're playing, like you end up shooting the machine with a gun to destroy it.
Ugh.
Destroy all the games, and the machine is literally, it's like an engine, right? It's like a big block of an engine that
Yeah.
isn't working. And the game is very explicitly saying, like, you're killing me creatively. You're killing me.
You're killing me. And like Davey does not interpret it that way, and it could not be more dead ass fucking obvious that this is like a breakup game. Stop talking to me.
Davey also has like a really weird attitude towards Coda's work, where he's like, yeah, he's definitely a genius, but I'm gonna cut out all these shitty parts of his games I don't like.
Yeah. Like, and
Yeah.
I think that's part of his like, Munchausen's by proxy validation loop, is like in presenting someone else's work and being like, I'm the curator, I found this beautiful thing, but also changing it in little ways to make it more playable and more intriguing to other people. You're completely altering the work and the original intent by the author by doing that, and also by presenting it in this way without his consent, also fucked up. Like, this isn't it. This ain't it, Davey. You're fucking it up.
Yeah. And then we get the final game that Coda is supposed to have made.
This
It's
tower.
called The Tower.
Because all the other games were too subtle.
Yes. Because all the other games were too subtle.
Oh God, I love this one.
Yeah. And this one culminates with a bunch of, it brings to a head all of the weirdnesses we've kind of been saying.
I love the lead up to it though. Oh my god.
Oh, totally. Take it
Because
away.
like the lead up to the culmination of the tower is it's this like kind of scary, dark, like obelisk-y sort of style like space that you're navigating, and there's all these unplayable parts of it, like very, very purposefully unplayable. Especially like there is, notably a maze, but it's invisible, and when you hit the walls, like a horrible noise plays and it teleports you back, and it's like super unplayable, and it's supposed to be. And Davy's like, but I put a little bridge over it, so let's skip it. And then you get to another thing, and it's like, here you have to just guess a 6 or 7-digit code. And that's all this is. So I'm just going to put the code on the floor, and then we can go on. And it's like, he did make this game for Davy. Like, for fucking sure, because he knows Davy will do this. He will alter this game so that he can play it and get through to it. And so it's like, okay, I have to bait Davy into, fixing these things in my games to get his attention, to ramp all this up, to get him to this final area that's in the kind of presentation of like a museum. You round a corner, you see a big wall that's lit like a museum. It's beautiful. And it's just like text on the wall that's like directly addressing Davy and saying like, I can't be friends with you. Stop doing this to me.
Yeah, and some of the lines Davey has in this, like, you get past the labyrinth, you get past the digit code, and then there's another one of the door puzzle again, except this time there isn't a switch on the inside, or there isn't a switch, so you can't do the puzzle. And Davey's like, yeah, so even if you brute force your way through the first 2 challenges, got to this point, there's actually no way to progress, and that's scary for me. The idea of Coda cutting himself off entirely, just saying that's it, that's the end of the conversation, not giving me any way to fix the problem. I feel like a failure, I guess, when I can't fix the problem. I can open this door for you, so let me do that. And again, Coda is someone to be fixed. All of these things are things to be fixed. The games, like interpreting the games, are the way to fix this human being.
Mm.
Yeah, the game is very deliberately saying to Davy, and do we just read what the game literally says to Davy?
Yeah.
Might as well.
And like the instant he walks into this space with like the Dear John letters on the wall, like he has the realization like, I'm the reason you stopped making games, aren't I? And then like
Yeah.
you read all these things.
Yeah. So we get, Dear Davy, thank you for the interest in my games. I need to ask you not to speak to me anymore. I wonder at times whether you think I'm making these games for you. You've so infected my personal space that it's possible I did begin to plan solutions to my work somewhere hidden between games. Is there an answer, a meaning that would make you any happier? Would you stop taking my games and showing them to people against my wishes, giving them something that's not yours to give, violating the one boundary that keeps me safe? Would you stop changing my games? Stop adding lampposts to them. So the lampposts, we find out, never existed until Davey put them in to add meaning to them.
What a weird choice too. Like lampposts of all things.
Yep. It's real like I'm an artist, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's real
lamppost.
like, yeah, 101. Here's a beacon of light, of hope. Sure, dude. Make it a lighthouse too. I don't know.
Yeah. Would you simply let them be what they are? When I am around you, I feel physically ill. You desperately need something, and I cannot give it to you. I literally do not have it. Struggling to come up with new ideas is not making me depressed. Low points are just part of the process. The fact that you think I'm frustrated or broken says more about you than it does about me. I realize that this doesn't make sense to you just yet, which is fine. You're not my problem to solve. But I do hope that one day it clicks and that you make peace with this thing that you're wrestling. And when you finally see what I'm talking about, don't say anything.
Oh,
Which is awesome.
it's so good.
It flips, this moment flips basically every moment in the previous games. You reinterpret everything Davey's been saying to you from the start, like all of these experiences, the house, with all the chores. Oh yeah, Davey put the part where he says, oh, this is just a reinterpretation of the door puzzle. You find out that the lamppost at the end he added, the part where you get in and leave where it becomes kind of a metaphor, was entirely Davey's creation. It was a completely different game than what Davey showed you and how he presented it. And so it makes you question everything, right? Like how much of the experience that was curated, how much of the stuff that led you up to this final game was ever in the text at all.
I think this is maybe one of my favorite unreliable narrators in like anything is Davey here.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the verisimilitude, the reality, the realness that it's initially presented as, because it's like, I'm Davy Reed and I made the Stanley Parable. Here's my real email address. Yeah, like starting him from this place of authority, and it starts becoming more clearly fictional as time goes on. And then like you have this part, which is like very meta narrative at this point, because he's having an on mic breakdown. Like he unravels at this point,
Yeah.
and like you go through some other like cool geometric and abstract environments while he's like having this meltdown. And when you're in between the space in those doors, there's no like exit, and it like the walls close in and get like tighter and tighter and tighter. And it's like, oh, we're not like in a game by Coda now. Like we're in Davy's head having a panic attack, not being able to wrestle with any of this. And he walks away from all of this with the wrong answer too.
Yeah, and that the final monologue that Davey has, that breakdown is that's why I'm releasing this collection of your work, is because I haven't been able to find any other way to reach you. I've tried everything, and so part of me has hope that if I put this compilation out in the world, and if I put my name on it, that maybe enough people will play it so that it finds its way to you, so that I can tell you I'm sorry. I know I screwed up. If I apologize to you truly and deeply, will you start making games again? Please. I need to feel okay with myself again, and I always feel okay as long as I had your works to see myself in. I mean, is something wrong with me? Because I know I did an awful thing, and I'm doing it again right now. I'm showing people your work, but I can't stop myself from doing it. That's how badly I need to feel something again, like I'm an addict. There has to be something wrong with me. Can I apologize? What if I tell you I was wrong? Will that work? Will that fix it? I don't know. I don't think it will, but there's nothing else that I can do. Just tell me what you want. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Coda
Please
did.
start making games again. Please help me. Please give me another one of whatever it is that makes you complete. I want whatever that wholeness that you just summoned out of nothing and put into your work. You were complete in some way I never was. I want to know how to be a good person. I want to know how to not hate myself. Please, I'm fading, and all I want to know is that it's going to be okay. You were taken away. That's his final monologue. Which is
Oh, oh my
so
god, this
good.
guy. Oh my god. I love it. He also had a point where he was talking about how he like literally cannot comprehend not needing validation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my god, same. Like it's like this is so sad. Like, it's so uncanny, and it's double uncanny to like see this person unraveling and kind of being like, I've been there. I know what that's like. Like, I don't like myself. I don't, I see myself too much in things and assign too much meaning to it. And like I do it with Davies games. It's like, are you in my head? Because that's my psychology happening right in front of my face. So it's like disturbing in a way.
Yeah, Pete, did you have any interpretation of kind of like this last section here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the rift happens earlier, but like there's a point that comes in the game where you very much have to grapple with the break between, let's say, like Davy the character and Davy the author, if we're,
Mm.
assuming they're the author. Like ideally it should come earlier, but at the very least it should come now. And I think that's what makes the game most interesting, is when you then have to take a step back and say, like, okay, he's obviously doing something very deliberate. What's the purpose of it? Like, what is Davy the author trying to tell us? But then you've then fallen into the very trap that the game set of wondering what the author's trying to tell you.
Hell yeah.
And then you then have to make a whole bunch of your own text like questions, like, okay, well, what's our text here? Is it just this game? Is it actually the like Davy the real individual's life and their experience creating the Stanley Parable? Like, well, no, we don't want to bring that in because he's told us we shouldn't. Well, has he? Like, what have we actually learned here? And then you have to go through all these meta questions, which are very interesting questions, but at the same time are questions the game seems designed to discourage. But wait, is the game designed to do anything? And you fall into this Ouroboros that's very
Ugh.
interesting, but very hard to climb out of.
I am endlessly impressed and interested in games that make me feel confused in this kind of way. Like psychologically, it's so interesting psychologically to be affected by a game in this kind of way, because most people talk about like, oh, this game really affected me, meaning like it was, emotionally resonant or something like that, or it was around during a difficult time in my life, which is totally valid. But like this is like one of those ones where it's like psychologically you've made me question a lot of things about how I interact with media by asking myself these questions. Am I not learning the same lesson Davey wasn't learning in the game by doing it to the IRL real Davey Reedon, you know?
Hmm.
I like being made uncomfortable.
Yeah, and this game is happy to do it. And after you get that kind of very explicit, hey, stop interpreting my games, like go touch grass, Davey, please go touch grass. You get an epilogue, which is this level that, I mean, it's kind of a big open space you're traveling through. Davey has more narration, like more love, more praise, more people telling me I'm good, always more. It's like a disease solution. Guess if someone told me ahead of time he just really enjoyed making prison games, maybe I wouldn't have thought he was so desperate. I wouldn't have told so many people that he was desperate, which is another thing. Like, you find out that what Davey's saying in the narration earlier on is what he was telling others, right? Like, it's almost, was it Van Gogh who, like, all of his works really broke out after he passed away, and his biography was part of the selling point of what made his work so appreciated?
Yeah, it wasn't super like marketable during his life.
Mm.
He didn't make much money.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, when you had the tortured artist narrative, I mean, the work was always good, but like the tortured artist narrative helped sell the work also, and so Davey kind of invented one for Coda
Yeah.
to help make this work more "quote unquote" resonant.
Well, I think a lot of it was just projection on his part because he was miserable, you know?
Totally. And so he basically took his biography and then put it on top of the works of some other person and then stamped his name on it.
And then when people went, oh, wow, he's so talented, poor thing, it felt like he was being, pitied and complimented and told he was good.
Yeah. And this level ends in that beam that you saw in the second game you experience, and it teleports you up, and you see you're surrounded by labyrinths on all sides. And as you get further and further up, the labyrinth kind of looks like a brain. I feel, at least for me,
Yeah.
it kind of looked like a brain, and you're kind of seeing someone's mind from above, right? Like all of a sudden,
I did not notice that if it is in there.
I would agree with you, Gina, but maybe we're both just weird.
I need to replay it again, clearly. The whole thing.
my interpretation there is just like, hey, now you're seeing this person's mind. Now that you're actually just playing a game and not, and it also ends with Davey kind of saying, "I'm going to walk away. Like I feel like I have work to do, not that I have to make up for, and so I'm just gonna okay." And then Davey walks away, and that's kind of where I think you can kind of appreciate. There's been this pattern of labyrinths throughout the games, and this is one where you can see, oh, it's all been labyrinths all the time.
And you know what? I interpret this as every labyrinth you've come across, he's skipped you past.
Yes,
True.
And it's like, here it is, the ultimate labyrinth, knowing yourself. Like it's like you can't skip this. This is the work you have to do. Stop
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and embracing the tension, right? Like, not just labyrinths, like any moment where there was friction in these
Yeah.
games, Davey has ordered you around, and that the friction is the thing that makes it creative, and that makes most of these works interesting. Is the parts where there's friction, and Davey just wants to smooth brain it. He just wants to go
Yeah.
straight to the message.
He treats all of them like it's a mistake that
Yep.
Coda made instead of an intentional choice.
Yes. And I think there's a commentary on game design there too. Like, hey, this part where there's friction, let's get around that because who would want to play that?
Mm.
But I mean, the real thing would be like, oh, there's friction here. Let's put a microtransaction in front of it so you can buy your
Yeah.
way past it.
Let's monetize the convenience.
100%. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so that's the beginner's guide.
Yeah, we've explained it all. It's unpacked completely. So
Nothing left. Don't
Yeah,
play
don't
this
even worry about
game.
it.
We just played it for you. It's fine.
Yeah, and we'll have after this point we'll have a part 2 with M, kind of going over the game developer's perspective on this. So I mean, for you, it'll just happen immediately. For me, we're recording it right now. So
The magic of audio.
magic of audio.
Wow.
And now bringing in M once again, this time to talk about the beginner's guide and specifically her perspective as a developer on the beginner's guide. So M, as a developer, what did you think about all of the different parts of this game? Like what it says about building prototypes and building microgames and stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think depending on how you interpret this game, doing this podcast may be reprehensible. If we are taking it at face value based on what Davey says in the narration, if Coda is a real person, we should not be covering this game. But suspending disbelief, I think, is an important part of assessing this game. There are those who are still skeptical if this was like real on some level. I don't think Davey has said very much about it as far as that goes. So yeah, I'm going to
You're gonna treat it as though it is ethical.
yes, I'm gonna assume that Coda is not a real person. This was a facade that you have to buy into in order to take the message from it. So, as far as the actual game design goes, I can see a lot of like my early work. I think a lot of developers' early attempts at making games in these games, especially in the early levels where it's just a small thing that has no beginning or end to it. The Counter-Strike level, for example, that's just messing around with the engine. The first level, which is Whisper, which is where you're running around with a gun and there's an alarm going off. That one is like first time using the source for your own thing. And then a lot of the middle levels that are much smaller, backwards, for instance, where you can only walk backwards, which is an interesting conceit, I'll admit. These are like basically testing what you can do with the engine. They're like sketches, I would say.
Okay. Is like long, like hallways. Like if I were coming in with like no game knowledge and I was like, all right, I just want to like build something.
Mhm.
Is hallways like a pretty standard first step? Like I feel like long square tubes would be pretty easy.
Yeah, it's I don't know if I haven't worked in Source, I'll admit that. So making a hallway in something like Unity, which is what I usually would work in around this time, was a little bit more difficult because you only had polygons. So you would make like a square and then you would put walls, which are just another rectangle on top of it.
Yeah, Unity, I feel like, is the default Unity starter game is like wide open expanse,
Yeah,
like
yes.
with bumps in the terrain that you can run around on.
Even less than that. I think it gives you a flat plane, and then if you want to actually make like mountains and such, you have to use a tool to get that in there, which might not occur to someone who's just experimenting with it. Um, I only know about that because I went to school, I think. But yeah, Source might be different because I know that it's working in like with default assets and such. So it might have like build some hallways, and there are ways to just like automatically do that.
Yeah, I think some of this would be pretty easy to make in Source, I would guess.
Yeah. Yes.
That raises a question.
Mhm.
As someone who has made prototypes before,
Yes.
if someone was to play a bunch of your prototypes and try to ascribe the meaning of your life to the narrative through line they are reading out of the versions of the game that you're
Uh-huh.
making, what would you think of that?
I would
You
beat
think
them
it's
to death
accurate?
with hammers. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it. It's I haven't looked back at my early work in probably over 10 years. No, a little less than that because I was still in school 10 years ago. So 5 years, let's say. And if someone was to like just take a whole bunch of them, scoop them up into a collection, that's in quotes, and be like, as you can see, if we follow from point A to point B, we can tell that the maker of these games was extremely depressed, and which, to be fair, I was, but you don't have to say it. I feel like this is like a armchair psychology that we see a lot more of in, like, these analysis videos and such on YouTube. Like, what's the truth behind the Stanley Parable? What was the what was the artist thinking as they were working on this? I say the Stanley Parable because Davey received a lot of responses like that when that game came out, because it got a whole lot of traction. Yeah, it was at a time where I think this was like really kicking up too. That came out in 2013, right? Let's
Yes.
see, somewhere around there.
Stanley Parable, you mean?
Yeah. So at the time where Stanley Parable came out, that was like, the height of YouTube analysis. A lot of people who were looking at these games, picking apart, like, oh, if you go to this location at this time and you do this thing, you can, you know, it means that the creator had something wrong with them. Um, post,
2013.
yes, post Portal, I think Portal was like a real flashpoint for this. Um,
When it showed like the person's actual apartment. No,
yeah,
not
when
Portal. What am I thinking of?
I don't know, what are
You're
you
thinking
thinking
of
of?
The Witness.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, you're right about that one too. I was thinking Portal because, like, you get the like, you can crawl behind a thing and then you see like scribbling on the wall and everyone's like, what does it mean? That sort of
Mhm.
thing. Okay, so we were primed for looking at games like this, and if we want to look at games in this way, as the character of Davy wants us to, it's looking at it as a body of work. If you were to look at my older stuff, like stuff that I've rubbed from the internet, basically, and try to ascribe anything to it, that's just deeply flawed, because it wasn't made as a, like, talking to each other uh, type of like connected universe sort of thing. And so I think it's deeply problematic, for one, if we're taking it at face value. The character of Davy has done a crime, maybe literally.
One of the points that you're making here that I think is really good is just like sometimes there's just a bunch of drafts that you're
Yeah,
working on, and if
yeah,
you treated each draft as though it was an independent work, instead of edits on the pathway to an idea,
right.
it would be lunacy, right? Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
every draft that, I mean, we've said Hemingway earlier in the show, like, if every draft of every Hemingway novel was treated as its own separate work, and they are just iterating on the same theme over and over again, and it's like, this person's trapped making the same thing over and over again. It's like, no, I'm making one thing, and it's taking
mhm.
me a bunch of tries.
Yeah. I'm experimenting with different views of a thing. That doesn't mean I'm like obsessed with that thing or something. It means it's iteration on, you know, like, what I don't it, so strange. I'm flabbergasted by the implication here. Anyway,
A question earlier in the show,
yes.
that as a developer you might have
Hmm.
some insight on, like
Sure.
how if Davey cuts out large chunks
Yes.
of some of these games and deems them
Yes.
irrelevant.
Oh boy.
Pete was, well, one, how does that make you feel as a developer? And then two, Pete was wondering the logistics, and I gave some thoughts on how that would work, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Okay. So We're talking about when like Davey says, this puzzle is too difficult, I'm just gonna skip you over it. Like
Yep.
press a button and
Or like you're going up the stairs and it's like, oh, it slows you to a crawl. I hit a
yeah,
button so that you can just run at
right.
normal speed.
Yes. I mean, for one, this is proof that like Davey has his fingers in the pie, as it were, because this proves that he's got source control. Like he is in an editor doing things to these games, and he's not just a like passive viewer. So in the case of like the staircase where you slow to a crawl and he says hit a button and you'll be fine to just walk up there. I actually didn't even press the button, and I was like, fuck you, buddy. And I just slowly crawled my way up that staircase. And what you find up there is like ideas just floating around. This was not something that anyone was ever meant to see. Like, this is a thing on Coda's computer, which, Coda is not walking up the stairs every time. This is like a security system. And Davey has admitted to just like, well, I'm just gonna go around it, and
Oh, that was your take on that? That this was a digital space that Coda's just put some ideas in just because like it was a
yeah,
scratch sheet. Like it was a
yes,
scratch sheet.
exactly. hmm Yeah. So when there are things like this case, where are the other ones? I know late in the game there are a bunch,
Well, the second level there is a labyrinth that Coda warps you
right?
Davy warps you past. There is a section where you're going down like in the house,
hmm
and then it's got the fantastical space underneath where you're
Right.
supposed to just like wait in a cage for an hour,
Oh, yeah.
and Davy just lets you out. The very final level, there's spots where there's another labyrinth. There's just a code that you need to put in,
hmm
and then Davy needs to like put a control on a door to get you through. And then there's
Right.
also just like the level where you're doing chores, where Davy wrote an ending.
Yeah. Yep.
It was supposed to just keep you in a loop doing chores.
Uh-huh. And sometimes the point is endless tasks. I feel like I am in that loop of endlessly doing chores at times, and I think that's the point. I don't think you can just walk away from the like, oh, you've reached the end, you get to stop making the bed and cleaning off the table and all that.
And
Yes.
and what would be like the actual logistics of doing something like that? Like how spider
Oh
web
boy.
would like that ending be? Like would Davey have to really pour through code? Or would there just be like, oh, let me cut out this one line?
So it depends on the actual coding language that's used in source. So I take this with a grain of salt because I haven't worked in it.
Well, you know way more than I do, so already step ahead.
Okay. So the way that it would probably work would be like a tracker, like it counts a number, and then like if it's a 2, then you do dishes. And if it's a 3, you clean the bed, and it would just rotate through that. So at some point, Davy could have coded in something like if you reach 10, then door opens and you get to leave. And in order to do that, it seems like he had to delete the character that was giving you commands, which he acts like is a he acts like it's a like big deal, like oh the guy is gone now. But you can just like code that in there, and this seems to be a I don't remember if there's a narrative component to this or if it just ends. I think it just ends.
It just ends and lets you out of the house and lets you go
Yeah,
to a space that Davy made.
right. And we know that this is Davy's creation because as the light post is a whole other thing. Yeah. So as far as house goes, that's level 10. Yeah, that's chapter 10. It seems as though he just coded in after the question that says, "Do you enjoy this?" He just goes and puts a command in there that kills basically everything.
Yeah, it's very inelegant.
Yes.
He just
Yeah.
cuts out the code, and it's not like he codes a true ending where they're like, "Congratulations, you've done enough chores. Move
Yeah.
on with your life." It's just like delete door, delete character.
Yeah. Yep. And it's it's gross. It's very gross.
I was gonna say, like, would you consider this like vandalism?
Yeah. Yes. Honestly.
Or plagiarism, I guess, depending on how you looked at it.
Yeah. It's a little bit of both. I think it's vandalism of someone else's work. There are people in like the I took a look at the community hub or whatever in Steam, and people were like, we're always using someone else's engine in order to make things. We are like, unless you've made a computer by yourself and are doing like engine creation, you're always going to be working with someone else's shit. But you're not to this level working with someone else's stuff. Like,
You do have to pay people if you use assets that they
yes.
made. Like
Generally, there are some agreements you have to do. Like maybe it's in community common, whatever.
Creative
They're
Commons.
Creative Commons. Yes, there are licenses to that.
Yeah. Like I use Microsoft Word. Nobody's ever
Uh-huh.
like going to complain about doing that.
Right.
But if you open up Huck Finn in Microsoft
Yeah.
Word and
Yeah,
then
like I
make
wrote
it,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
make it so that Huck Finn makes out with Tom Sawyer just a
Hoo-hoo.
lot,
Hey,
a whole
listen.
lot,
Now we're talking.
then it's probably more vandalism than anything, or at the very least, it's slash fiction.
It's more than that because you are then taking that, you're ripping out the chapter and then stitching it into a book where you've done this like 15 times.
Yeah.
To other classic novels.
It's one thing if you're on Tumblr posting your Huck Finn Tom Sawyer slash
Right.
fiction. It's another thing if you're going into the library, pulling out a copy of Huck Finn, and then pasting your fanfic chapter in the middle and then putting it back without anyone being the wiser.
Yeah. What was the what
No,
was the
is it
question?
what was like the manipulation here and all of the stuff that Davey's doing? Like, would you consider it vandalism? Like, how does it make you feel?
Yes.
And it seems like it makes you feel like this is gross and it sucks.
Yeah. Getting to the end of this game, I have some different interpretations that we can talk to when we get there.
Sure,
But
let's go there.
as we're going through, hold on one second before we go there. Uh, as we're going through, when we find out like Davey is putting in the light posts, what are the other things? Basically, just letting you skip past what would be considered the game part of it. If you were to do this to anyone's game, you should not tell anyone about it. Like you could do whatever you want on your own personal computer. Like you can skip over some part of something that you don't care about. But this is a game on Steam. This costs like $15 or something.
hmm
Yeah. So $10. I'm sorry. We have to look at it as though Davey has done all this and is also profiting from it. Which, what if this game was free, it would still be gross. But also, you're getting $10 for it.
Yeah. Any interpretation where Coda exists is bad.
Yes.
Bad for Davey. So
Yeah.
we assume that this is a work of fiction and, it's very meta instead of a
Yes.
crime.
Because we have to. Because otherwise, we're complicit in something deeply problematic.
So what did you make of the ending then? What are those interpretations?
All right. So in the end, it all breaks down. Coda, we assume Coda writes a letter to Davey that is basically like, don't talk to me anymore. I didn't make these for you. You've been changing the games. A whole bunch of like very damning evidence that Davey has been doing this for as long as the games have been coming out. Started in 2008. It's now 2011, I believe, is when he says the tower comes out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
the last year.
So this is bad. But We also have evidence that maybe this is meant to be a like cohesive thing because we have such things as there is a code that gets put in earlier in this level. Do you remember what the code was for that?
1-6.
151617.
Yeah, 1-5
Yeah,
1-6
that.
1-7.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but the tower is a tarot card.
Ah,
I did know that from Balatro.
Yeah. If you recall your Balatro.
I don't like that Davey plagiarized the hit game Balatro
That's,
preemptively.
hmm something like 10 years before Balatro came out.
I can't believe Balatro plagiarized hit game The Beginner's Guide.
Yeah. Okay, so once you know that this level is called the tower, and you get that code 15, 16, 17. And earlier in the game, when there was the level with the messages, do you remember that one?
The ones where you're like walking through and it's the internet, the
Yeah.
one that's supposed to be online. Yeah.
Yeah, it's claiming that it's online, but then Davey says Coda wrote all of these. This is the Chapter 8 notes, which is allegedly come out April 2009. There are some notes scattered around the level. A lot of them don't matter, but there are some that say the devil, the tower, the star. So as early as 2009, a year after Coda allegedly starts making games, there's this theme of tarot cards appearing. And when you actually place this like tarot, like overlay it on top of all the games, it actually has a kind of interesting, like, I have a theory about this. Can I run through a bunch of tarot cards and connect them to levels?
Please do, but only if you explain what the tarot card means.
Yes, I'm absolutely going to.
Okay.
So let's start with level 0. This is the Counter-Strike level. This would correlate to the Fool.
The Fool.
The Fool is young and vulnerable. He has not yet experienced the ups and downs of life, leaving him unaware of the magnitude of life's challenges, as well as the potential he holds. So let's start with that.
That's your persona protagonist. You're
Yes.
infinite.
Yeah. Also plagiarizing Hit Games Persona. So yeah, we're starting with the Fool. We go on to Whisper, which is the level where you're running around with a gun. This would correspond to the Magician. Is a reminder that you are unique and have many gifts. These skills set you apart from the crowd and can help you begin new projects or overcome adversity. We are learning a little bit more about Coda's potential here. Backwards would correspond to the High Priestess. The High Priestess is a card of awareness. This card urges you to listen to your inner voice and follow your instincts. So when it tells you to walk backwards, it doesn't actually say to walk backwards, but you have to interpret it for yourself and follow that drive. Stop looking for answers in the outside world. Turn within for the guidance you seek. And then we have entering, corresponds with the Empress, encourages compassion, beauty, and love. I don't know what the connection is there. Some of them have to be a little looser. Stairs, puzzle, exiting. So let's see if there's anything in these. The Hierophant may be relevant to number 5. Puzzle. This is Ready Set Fish. This is where we first see the door puzzle. Coda is said to like. The Hierophant, experienced in spirituality and guidance, and his job is to bring these lessons down to us here in the real world. And when the Hierophant comes up in your tarot reading, you're encouraged to follow the rules and to find a spiritual perspective on your current situation. So this is the puzzle of the doors. As far as I've laid out so far, is it tracking? Am I insane?
I mean, maybe, but it's interesting, you know?
It's interesting, and I want to see where the numbers come in on the code. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
All
And
right.
I'm also conscious of the fact that you are imposing a meaning on these games that we just said it would be insane for anyone to impose a meaning on a bunch of prototypes. So I'm very interested.
I understand that
Bring it
this may be
home.
completely contrary to everything I've set up to this point.
Yeah, but go off.
All right, I'm going off.
Go off, Queen.
Chapter 7 down. This is where we into the Streetwise Fool. Also, it's called the Streetwise Fool.
Mhm.
So this is the chariot. The chariot connects to your natural drive and determination and can indicate an upcoming victory. This card reminds you that your greatest successes won't come through limited thinking. When you combine the knowledge of your mind with that of your heart and spirit, you are an unstoppable force. This is where you meet those NPCs that are like standing around a table, and this is where we start to get the dialogue trees, which I will say seem above Coda's skill level, especially with the turning heads, but that's just me. Anyway, now we go on to notes. Notes is chapter 8, which corresponds to strength. Strength represents courage, fortitude of your heart, and your ability to withstand anything life hands at you. If this card arises in your tarot reading, you are reminded that you are strong enough to handle whatever you are facing and will come out of it with even more power than you had before. This is a long level that doesn't seem to a greater meaning beyond like look at a big picture on a wall, but it also has all these notes around which seem to be reaching out for someone. If we interpret what Davy says. All right, but now we're gonna hit the thing on the head. Chapter 9, Escape. This is Porn Stars Die Too. This is the prison. This one is where we get a bunch of different versions of the same prison. And this corresponds to the hermit. The hermit yearns to be alone. He knows that the only way to process what is happening in life is to withdraw from the noise of the world and create a quiet space of solitude. When the hermit comes up in your reading, the answers you need will come from within. We've made a prison for ourselves. And then we go on to House. House is chapter 10. We know about the house. We've talked about it before. It corresponds to Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is constantly revolving. Sometimes you will be at the top, and sometimes you will be at the bottom. This tarot card reminds you that nothing is permanent, and good or bad, you must cherish the lessons that this moment is bringing to you. So, if we take Davy's intervention out, we know that this would just constantly keep going around and around in a circle, and there's no end to the chores that you have to do around the house. So, Wheel of Fortune, that's 10. Then we go to 11. Lecture. This is where you are getting a lecture and you are in the crowd and then you are the teacher. Corresponds to justice. Your firm but fair reminder that there is a consequence for every action. Whatever life is handing you at this moment comes from decisions you and others have made in the past, reflecting natural cause and effect. When this card comes up in your tarot reading, make sure you are acting fairly in all your interactions with others. Doing the dialogue options, you are the teacher, and doing it seems to be a disservice to the actual people that are listening. If you select the the options that it wants you to select, quote, what it wants you to select. Chapter 12, Theater. Theater is where we are on the stage. We have to do a bunch of like stage acting, and we are told that we're doing it all wrong. And then the character retreats. And this would correspond to the Hanged Man. Tells you that sometimes small sacrifices are required to benefit the bigger picture. When the Hanged Man arises in your reading, you likely want to make a move but don't know where to begin. Lightening your grip on what is no longer working for you or detaching from the outcome of your situation can help you release yourself. Yes?
No, that's a good lineup.
Yep. Yeah.
Gay man the card.
All right. 13, Mobius. This one is the one where you are on a space station.
And crushed by the door from the puzzles.
Yes, you're getting blowing up against the door. There's a on the nose metaphor. So this one you are told that you have to keep your eyes closed, but if you do that, you have no idea what's going on. So this is the 13th chapter, corresponding to death. which is not a card about physical death. The death card speaks of cycles and is a reminder that all things must pass. Hanging on to situations from the past will hinder you from allowing new, better things to enter your life. In every ending lies a chance for a new beginning.
That one lines up nicely.
Yeah. You see, it's
Moving.
coming together.
Yep.
I'm almost to the actual point of this, like, what, 15-minute, maybe longer. All right. 14, island. You are on an island. You're moving around. It's telling you about the machine. Dialogue says that it's going to be showing you the machine. It has like the breaking walls and everything. This is 14, temperance. The temperance card is a master of moderation. She encourages peace and patience and reminds you to go with the flow of your life instead of trying to force its pace or direction. When temperance turns up in your tarot reading, it's a message to take things as they come and remain flexible enough to change with the changes. I think that tracks. All right, now here's the numbers from the puzzle. These are also the ones that appear in the messages in chapter 8.
Hmm.
Chapter 15, machine. This is the one where they've captured the machine that has been making all of the games. And this corresponds with 15, the devil. The devil card carries themes of restraint and powerlessness. When it comes up in your tarot reading, you are likely feeling stuck. The devil has convinced you that you have no options, but this couldn't be further from the truth. You hold the keys to your own freedom, but it's up to you to open the lock. And then, on the nose, chapter 16, the tower. The tower represents destruction. It often comes up when everything in your life feels like it's crumbling and you have no way of stopping it. The message of this card is to just let it fall. The weakest parts of your life must be torn down in order to build something strong and sturdy in their place. So this is why we have to tear down, in this case, Davy himself, tear down the action of creation, so that we can get to chapter 17, which has no title. It is just called the epilogue, and we assume that this is created by Davy because Coda has not made more games after the last one sent to Davy. It is a strange experience. You're walking through spaces that don't seem naturally connected, and it ends with Davy just kind of going off. So, chapter 17
That's the
corresponds
star.
to the star. The star is the embodiment of hope and healing. She is a calming influence that brings messages of renewal, optimism, and inspiration. When the star comes up in your tarot reading, she reminds you that the universe is working in your favor and encourages you to have faith in where you're being taken. So, that's my pitch for what this game is.
It's kind of a journey through tarot.
It's a journey through getting to this point where you can let go of these like old perceptions of someone else's work, find out something about yourself, in this case Davy's self, which is this intrinsic need for validation that seems to be not only harming him but harming the people around him. Yeah, I think if we're taking it as individual things, Coda had this in mind from the start, but we're being told that that is not the case, and Coda is working individually, like focusing on one thing, throwing it aside. This interpretation is overt, I would say, by the end of the game, especially when like the title of the 16th level is the tower and it features a tower. So I don't think this is far off. Going for a deeper interpretation.
Yeah.
But you
I-
can tell me if I'm insane.
You don't seem insane, though. I do wonder, are other tarot cards in all of the little bubbles beyond the devil, the tower, the star? Are there other things in there? The 15, 16, 17 makes sense to me.
Hmm.
That lines up.
Yeah,
Though I guess that also like raises the question, like Coda apparently was met at a game jam.
right.
Game jams love having themes.
Hmm.
So it would be interesting if they said, "Oh, the game jam's theme was tarot," and I don't think that that's in any of the dialogue.
It's not presented as such.
The tower definitely.
Yeah.
That works for sure. 15, 16, 17 definitely works. I don't know 0 all the way up. If I buy every single one of them,
I feel like, yeah, particularly in the middle, like 5 to 8, 7 range, is kind of gets a little squirrely, but it definitely like seems to lock in after like 14, I would say.
It's also like as reasonable as anything Davy's doing.
True.
So if we're allowing Davy his project, why not tarot? It's a perfectly reasonable text as well.
I don't know if there's ever been like interviews with Davey about this game. I couldn't find any, or I didn't see if anyone confronted Davey about this. I would be interested if anyone had this interpretation.
is this a popular interpretation?
There is a page on the Beginner's Guide wiki, which is filed in Easter eggs. It says the title is Tarot. Tower, the alleged final work created by Coda, harkens to the tarot card of the same name. The Tower card is a card of chaos, upheaval, and momentous change, and is visually ominous. The unpleasantness of the game design may harken to the fear that the card often strikes into those who get the card in a reading. The chaotic nature of this game also meshes with this card's meaning. The game ends with a call for internal change from Davy, and is in fact a momentous change for Coda as he has freed himself from Davy's influence. I think that's too limited a view, because it's only taking into account the tarot reading of chapter 16. I think it tracks for the entire game. Apparently, no one else has this thought,
Good.
but I
Take-
think
it
it's
first.
right.
Take you can only get on the Deep Listens podcast.
Yeah, you heard it here first. The Beginner's Guide is all about tarot. It's about personal growth, and this is the read that I will write an article about or something. I don't know.
I would love to. I would read that article.
Yeah, go for
All right, work through it in real time.
it.
All right. Well, there's your take on the Beginner's Guide. All right. So thank you, Em, for your takes on the Beginner's Guide. And now
Thank
we will
you.
go back to the ending of the podcast. So any closing thoughts, Pete, Jess?
Play Davy Reedon's games. I'm a big fan, obviously. I'm a huge fan. I'm really excited for Wanderstop. The small amount I got to play, which is like the first hour or two of the game, I cried 4 times just during the intro. And it's like, oh no, my brain. Stop it, Davy. Stop seeing me. It's great. I love it.
Any final thoughts, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this seems like sort of, how do I want to phrase this? So, like I said, I'm not like really like dialed into the world of video game analysis, like hardcore, like literary journal style analysis. But this seems like the start of like a medium grappling with its critical tools. Like this is a conversation like literature had, decades ago, but that's because it's been around for, forever. And I think it's exciting to like be at a point in video game like history, let's say, where it's like grappling with, okay, what does it mean to analyze video games and how are we going to approach this in an interesting, critical way that goes beyond just, well, what's the developer want me to think?
And this came out a decade ago.
Mhm.
Which is the craziest thing. I also want to like point out that like I feel like, and I'm Davying Davy again, but his work is, I think, iterative and kind of reflective of the previous one, because the Stanley Parable came out and it was like a mega hit and it was super popular, and it was like 100% credited to just Davy, but other people made it too. William Pugh made it, and like a whole bunch of people make video games, but it's all accredited to the auteur. So I think he walked away from that with a lot of ideas in his head about like not deserving this authorship or something like that, and how the fame was startling. And I think he had like a blog post that ended up getting deleted because people misinterpreted it as him complaining about being successful. but it was like complaining about being misinterpreted and how something can run away from you once it's out. It's not yours anymore, or
Mhm.
something like that. And like he's had some really interesting like conference talks about this sort of stuff too. And then he makes the beginner's guide, which seems to be having this sort of conversation about authorial intent and interpretation and bringing your own baggage into stuff. And when this game came out, like people did not want this. They're like, "Oh, this is a fucking navel gazy walking simulator." And some people were very dumb and thought it was real. And that this is unethical because Coda should know about this. And like people were trying to figure out who Coda is. And there was like a whole like attempt to figure out like who Coda might be in real Davy's life that he's like making a parable about. Like so weird, so weird. But a lot of the like consensus of people that did not like this game is like, it's not funny. What the fuck? Like, the Stanley Parable's funny.
It's
And
definitely
then like,
not.
yeah, it's not. It's just like it's art. Sorry, it's not funny. And in the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, I feel there's a lot of little echoes of the beginner's guide in it because there's like a whole part where the narrator has a very similar breakdown to what Davy does in this game, and it's like about like, oh, but they wanted to be funny. It wasn't funny enough, and it's like, oh, I just exist for your entertainment, and it's just like going off about this to no one, and like the well comes back and stuff like that. And I just love how there's this little echoes of previous games in all of his stuff. So again, I'm looking forward to Wanderstop coming out March 11th.
Awesome. Jess, if people wanted to find you, where could they do so?
Oh, it's Voidburger on dang near everything. Your Blue Skies, your Twitches, not Twitter anymore. Fuck that Nazi website.
Mhm.
YouTube, all that sort of stuff. Check me out.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah. Thanks for playing the game I was really overly stoked to suggest to you guys. It's been a thrill. I thought, Pete, that you might not like this game because it didn't have like a character arc to it in a similar way that Jimmy did not have a quote unquote character arc in mouthwashing. So I'm pleased that you did like it, seemingly.
I was I wouldn't say pleasantly surprised because, obviously we liked his other stuff and I trust your recommendations. But yeah, it was
Aw,
really good.
thank you. Awesome.
Thank you, M. I think it is your turn to pick the next game we
It's
play.
my turn. Okay, it's my turn to pick. And I spent so long rambling that I don't remember what I had lined up. Hold on a second.
Well, with the power of editing, it'll be so snappy.
It will. It'll sound great. Oh, I know what we gotta do. Oh, hold on. Let me make sure I want to do this. This is gonna be a weird one, I think.
Finally.
I mean, they all are. Like, look
I
at
like
the
a
games
weird
I played.
game on this podcast.
Yeah, don't even worry about it.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna just lock in. Next time we are going to play Caves of Cud.
What? Which part of those were words?
Caves of Cud.
Okay, I got
QUD.
QD. Okay, I got the caves part.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, what is Caves of Cud?
All right, let me open up the Steam store page.
Oh no, is this like Dwarf Fortress?
Kinda.
Oh no.
Yeah, I said it was gonna be weird. Caves of Cud is a science fantasy roguelike epic steeped in retrofuturism, deep simulation, and swaths of sentient plants. Come inhabit an exotic world and chisel through layers of thousands-year-old civilizations. I don't know how we're gonna feel about this one, I'll be honest. This game has been on people's like top games list. It also only just released on full access after being in early access for something like 10 years, I want to say.
Great.
Sign of quality.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
It was aging in early access.
Yes.
But did it age like milk or like wine? We'll find out.
We'll see.
All right, thank you, M.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and you can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Till next time, Peace.